Welcome to the wonderful, wonderful world of Mr. Vernon Jackson. This is a special spotlight, a history tape without a number yet, but we are so delighted to have a very special young man on the dais today that has just celebrated his 80th birthday. And Mr. Vernon Arthur Jackson is a very special young man in your speaker's life, and for that reason we have decided to give him front and center stage on this wonderful, wonderful salute. And we're so pleased to have him on the dais today. Welcome, Mr. Vernon Arthur Jackson. We're so glad to have you with us today, young man.
Thank you, my friend Ruthie.
Okay. And I know that you're such a smiling young man because you also have on the dais today a very special other young lady in your life, and that is Georgia Annette Jackson Clemson. And I'm so pleased that you're here, my dear.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Now, recently we had you on the dais with Mr. Earl Tom Keel.
Yes, ma'am.
You've been real special to bring wonderful people here to the dais. And now, Mr. Keel didn't celebrate his 80th birthday, but he celebrated a wonderful time in his life when he's become really a retiree.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, that is not the case today. Mr. Jackson, a very special person, is not retired in any sense of the word. And so, Mr. Jackson, we want to interview you because as an 80-year-old young man, you're still working a full schedule, 5 days a week and sometimes 5.5 or even 6 days a week. And we would like to salute you on this very happy occasion that you celebrated on August the 13th of 2001, your 80th birthday.
Thank you.
And we'd like for you to look out into your camera and tell us a little bit about the real Vernon Jackson, who is a husband to Ruthie Jackson, a father to Georgia and Zanna Jackson, and now they have other married names, and also a grandfather of wonderful, wonderful grouping of children that we're going to name a little bit later on in this. And I believe you have 7 great-grandchildren, and the 8th is planned ahead for 2002, right? Is that acceptable to begin with for numbers?
Sounds good to me.
All right, where were you born, Mr. Jackson?
Prairie, Texas.
Prairie, Texas, and in what county in Texas?
Hamilton County.
Hamilton County, Texas. And back in those days, would you name your parents?
Johnny Jackson and Valera Jackson.
And Valera, before she was a Jackson, was a what?
Her name was Keller.
Valera Keller Jackson. Okay. You also were the firstborn of that family, and I believe the only son, right?
Correct.
All right. How about your sisters? I'd like for you to name your sisters.
My next sister is Mary Jackson Hickerson.
All right.
And the second sister is Louise Jackson Vance.
All right.
And my third sister is Gwendolyn Seymour, Gwendolyn Jackson Seymour.
Okay, and so with those 3 girls, I tell you, you had the run of the, you were born on a farm, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you decide you wanted to become a farmer in your young age after going to school down at Prairie, Texas?
I did not.
You opted out on that.
I farmed in 1 year, 1939, and it was a dry year, kind of like it is here in Grand Prairie, Texas, right today. And I was a grain farmer. I raised wheat and oats, and since it didn't rain, it only got about 10 inches high, and you couldn't harvest it. So I said, this farm is not for me, so I decided to look elsewhere.
Okay, and a young man graduating from high school and seeking out the colleges around in the area, you opted not to go to college, but to go to a wonderful aircraft school out of state. Was that unusual for a young man from Prairie, Texas?
Well, it was very unusual. It was only 3 of us that was looking in the Fort Worth Star Telegram one day, and it was advertising the Anderson Aircraft School in Los Angeles, California. So we talked my parents into bringing us to Fort Worth. We called a travel bureau, had to pay $15 a piece to go to Los Angeles, but we did got a travel bureau and went to Los Angeles and went to the Anderson Airplane School, and that was in 1941. And we attended the school out there and went to work for Lockheed Aircraft.
Lockheed Aircraft, and so you were a big-time employer building aircraft on the West Coast, right?
Right.
Okay. What brought you back to Texas?
We were well aware that North American Aviation was building a plant in Grand Prairie, Texas. And whenever we decided to come back in, well, actually, I'll have to correct, we went to California in 1940, and this was March of 41. We came back to Grand Prairie, Texas, and we took a look out where the North American plant was being built, and it was only two sides to it. They were building it, but we checked a little further, and the aircraft were being built down in the old Earl Hayes Chevrolet building right downtown Dallas.
Okay.
So that's where I first went to work. We three fellows, and I'd like to name those other two fellows, a fellow named Junior Hutton and Joe Betts. They were classmates of mine, and we were the one that originally went to California together, went to school together, came back here, and by that time, as I mentioned, that's 1941, and war clouds was hanging over our heads rather, well, I'd say very thick, and they were gathering, and so we thought we would probably go join the Navy, but whenever we attempted to do that, two of us went and one of us didn't, and I was the one that didn't go because of a physical defect that the Navy didn't take me, so I was in the aircraft business, and I worked in the aircraft business for 7 years here in Grand Prairie.
Okay, and what did you do in the aircraft business when you came out here from the Earl Hayes building? Where did you work and for whom?
Because we had experience, of course, and had the school and the experience, they immediately made me a foreman. And
How old were you?
19 years old.
A 19-year-old foreman in the aircraft business?
That is correct, and I immediately had 40 people working for me, and it grew to 250, but
What did you build?
We build the wings.
Wings for what two aircraft?
AT-6.
The AT-6 was the first one?
AT-6 was a trainer that United States used, and of course we sold some of them to Britain that they called them something else. I don't remember what they called them, but it was our United States AT-6 that we built the wings for that aircraft, and then of course later on we built the P-51 wings.
And you were still the foreman when you were working on the P-51 wings, right?
Well, they made me a assistant general foreman at night, but most of the time I was a foreman.
A foreman, okay. Name the most influential people that you worked with in the wing department at North American Aviation.
I'm going to name a gentleman that hopefully there be some people in TV land that will remember Jack Rohn. Jack Rohn was, I thought, the finest person in the world besides my father. He took me under his wing and told me what I needed to do to be a good foreman, and really helped me along, and that was the first person that I really, well, I asked him for his picture. That was the beginning. I have picture collection of those people that influenced my life in a great way, and Jack Roan was the very first one that I asked him for a picture, and I still have it.
And after North American Aviation and the war was over, and we went into contract termination and into transition to Timco, did you go on into Timco to work?
Well, yes, and I worked for another gentleman that I respect very highly, and I know many people will remember Eddie Heiler. Eddie Heiler was a household name in the aircraft business, and he was my general superintendent, and taught me a whole lot of things. Even in my work today, there's very seldom a week goes by that I don't remember something that Eddie Heiler taught me, and it was a wonderful experience, and I take my hat off to Eddie Heiler, even though he is deceased at this time.
What aircraft did you build for Eddie Heiler and Timco?
We built the Swift. In fact, I was in charge of the airplane that we called the Swift, and it was a little trainer. Excuse me. And I was in charge of it from the first little clip that we called subassembly through flight line and actually through flight. And we really enjoyed building that airplane, and some of them are still flying today.
And after the aircraft business, you decided that you wanted to leave that, and you ventured out into the real world. And what did you do, Mr. Jackson?
Well, one of the big things during the war was, what are you going to do when this war is over? And so I had, in the meantime, made a few friends in the aircraft business, and a gentleman named Everett Graff actually was my assistant foreman, and he told me, he said, Jackson, you know, when this war is over, we ought to go in the gumball business. He said, he's a little older than I was, and he said, you know, he said, during the Depression, I worked for a fellow up in Denton that was in the peanut and bubble gum business, and said, I actually went through college working for him, and said he built a brick house and paid for it during the Depression in the gumball business, the peanut business. Said, it's good, we ought to go into it. So that was kind of, he planted that seed, and that's actually what I did later on.
All right, and you began your business in 1947 down on what was then Myers Road in the vending business, and are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
It's called MacArthur
Same
Boulevard
place.
now.
The city helped me out some. I didn't move, but the city moved in that they changed Myers Road to MacArthur. So I now reside and work. My residence is there, and I also work at 200 MacArthur Boulevard.
Okay, and you're still in the gumball business, working for someone that bought your business from you, right?
Right. Yeah, as Ruthie mentioned, we started the business in 1947, and I believe it was 92. Let me back up a few years. In 72, a fellow named Dan Clemson, at my son-in-law and Georgia's husband, he and Georgia got married in 71, and 72, Dan had already, he was working in the aircraft business, but he decided that he had an interest in the gumball business because it looked like that what I was doing, well, it didn't take a whole lot of effort. I think that's what got him interested in it. We'll have to ask him. If you know Dan, you can ask him if that's correct. But anyway, Dan came to work for us at that time, and me being, I like to think of myself being a good, strong believer in the Lord, I asked the Lord if he'd give me 2 years to train Dan, that he would know how to run that business. Well, That was in '72. The Lord gave me 2 years plus a few more because, as Ruthie mentioned earlier, that I still work work every day, enjoy it. The reason she called it work, but I call it a vacation. Ruthie and I have not actually taken a vacation, what most people call a vacation, in 35 years. But I call what I do a vacation all the time, and people that knows Ruthie knows that she likes to do what she does, and she thinks she's on vacation all the time, and I hope nobody tells her any different.
Mr. Jackson, Dan bought the business. He in Georgia, so he in Georgia own product sales, charity service, store service, Jackson vending, and any other thing that's connected with that. But who do you actually work for that signs your check?
My grandson, Spencer Clemson, signs my check now, and keeps me motivated.
Yes, and it's been a wonderful working relationship having your grandson that is really your boss, and isn't that wonderful?
Yes, I'd like to recommend to some of you 80-year-old grandfathers out there, if you haven't worked for your grandson, it's a new experience, and I recommend it. Try it sometime.
All right. Mr. Jackson, you still work in the business each day of the week. What time do you get up to go to work every morning?
Well, I get up at
Make this quick. We've just got 6 more minutes left.
I get up at 4:30, and by the time Ruthie and I walk every morning for our exercise and have our breakfast, it's
In our prayer session.
we have a prayer session every morning, and it's I get to work at 7, but I don't have to go very far, to work. But I get to work at 7, and I actually work till 5. But sometimes Spencer lets me off at 3:30 whenever I look
Have done a good job.
real tired, and I've got all my duties worked off my list. I still work from a list, and that's the only way I can tell for sure when I'm through.
And Mr. Jackson, I think our viewing audience would be interested in knowing that you are a patient of a lot of different doctors, but your macular degeneration hit you in what year?
Oh, goodness,
15 years ago?
13 years ago, I believe, right now.
All righty, but you still have a machine that is a huge magnifying machine. Do you work from this machine? I think they would like to know that.
Yes, I do. In fact, I'm legally blind, but I have a large special machine that magnifies my work, and it's just a new world.
Yes. And it's real spectacular in that it may take you a little while to run these under the lights and to be able to transfer it onto a large television screen that you can see peripherally. And does that kind of discourage you, or are you just a happy camper because you can see it all?
Oh, I'm very, very happy, period, just to wake up in the morning, because I believe that scripture that says that this is a good day, the Lord's made it, so let's enjoy it. Now, I don't know for sure what version that's from, but it says something like that.
All right. Now, you've been very important in the community, and then in that you spent 15 years on the Grand Prairie School Board, 2 of those years as president of the school board. You served on the Urban Renewal Commission. How many years? 22 years?
I think so, from 60 to 82, I believe it was.
All righty, and you were chairman of that many of those years?
Most of those years.
You served on the Republic Bank's Bank Board, and was that the only bank you served on?
No, it was another one, but I can't think of the name of that little bank either that we started, but
It's not
Midway. Thank you, Midway National Bank. I was,
Then Republic,
yeah,
and then Nations Bank,
well, didn't serve on Nations Bank.
as an advisor at the
No.
first?
No, did on Republic,
On
but
Republic.
not on Nations.
Okay.
Nations runs theirs from, I think, South Carolina, North Carolina, and they didn't need any help from we Grand Prairians, as far as I know.
You're a Paul Harris Fellow with what Rotary Club?
Well, it's the main one right there.
The Big Friday Rotary Club?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, but you go to visit the Tuesday Rotary Club with all the good-looking girls in town that invite you.
Just when I get an invitation
Just-
and get an opportunity, and you indicate it's all right.
Yes, it is. That's right. And we're so thankful that Sandy Morrison and Kathy Ritterhouse and some of the other girls that are members there, they always take you to Rotary when they find you out just kind of wandering around town, right?
Sometimes.
Okay, and were there other interests other than church that you were interested in the community? I don't want to leave out any of the good salutes.
Well, I think we've named most of the things that I really have an interest in.
How about your church work? Where do you go to church?
Go to the Burbank Garden Church of Christ, where I served several years as an elder, and I enjoy it very much.
Okay, and who's the other elder that you work with?
Randall Hill is who is chairman of the Commission on Aging, I
Yes,
believe.
yes,
and,
he is.
He's a very active young fella and just a delight to work with.
That's great. All right. And you've been living in the Northeast area since 1947. I'd like for you to rest just a minute because I want to ask Georgia.
All right.
Yes, Georgia. Do you have any outstanding story that you would like to tell about Mr. Jackson, your father? Anything that you remember, especially when you used to ride around in the car with him to run vending machines, and he would always give you an ice cream cone and all of these kind of good things. Is there anything special?
Well, it was all very special, as most childhood memories are, but I do recall being in the front seat as we would make the route locations to go run the vending machines, and the good part was if it was at a convenience store or a grocery store, usually Daddy would come back with a big orange drink or something like that for me, so I thought that was a real treat. And he also, I remember he would take me to John Darty's service station.
Oh, yes.
And that was always fun because he was such a nice, friendly man, and he used to give me attention, and I thought that was great.
He called you Miss Georgia, didn't he?
He did. He did, and he always planted in my head that my boyfriend was Doak Walker.
And you thought that was exceptional, wasn't it?
I thought it was a great idea.
Yes, and I believe there was a time when Mr. Jackson took you and Zana is our older daughter, to lunch one day, and y'all were sitting in the cafe, and he said, what was that famous saying he said then?
He really wanted to pay us a compliment, but if any of you know my daddy very well, it's difficult for him to give you just a straight compliment. So he spent a little time telling us what wonderful daughters we had been, and gave a few examples and bragged on us, and then he said, up until you were about 12 years old. And we both took offense to that. Not only did we take offense, we both burst into tears at the restaurant.
At the restaurant, a local restaurant here in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yes.
Yes, but that was an exciting time of our life, wasn't it?
It was, and
yes.
it was, he thought it was a joke, but we didn't take it as a joke.
Yes, and he let you have a dog. Do you remember your dog's name?
Well, of course, is this a test?
Yes.
One was Fiddly D.
Yes, Fiddly D.
And he was a collie, and he was beautiful.
Collie, yes. And then he had a little dog named Brassy, wasn't he? Because he was brass colored, wasn't
Yes,
he?
and one of the most interesting things was I did have a working mother. And so my dad had the business there at home, and a lot of times I was there and he would be out working. So he was not only an entrepreneur and a wonderful businessman, but sometimes he had to be Mr. Mom.
Yes, he did. He really did. Had to be Mr. Mom because he had me working because I believe Mr. Bill Barnett, what was Mr. Bill Barnett's famous saying, Mr. Jackson?
He said Barnett Jackson was a good provider. If Ruthie didn't have a job, he'd get her one.
I thought that was an exceptional statement from a young man. Bill Barnett was a very important insurance man here in Grand Prairie, Texas, until he was deceased several years ago, and very important person in our life for many years.
Fine gentleman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson, we still have about 3 minutes to go on here. Is there anything you would like to say last of all on this? That what are you probably the proudest of, or any salute that you'd like to say? Now that you're 80,
Well,
and you're as old as I am.
Life begins at 80.
Life
and
begins at 80.
I'm in the process of getting me some stickers made up to put on my mail that I mail out, and it's going to say life begins at 80. And of course, I really believe that. And to you folks that's younger than that, just remember that it's important to get to be 80, because life begins at 80 if you make it that far.
All right. Now, do you plan to keep on working, Mr. Jackson?
I plan to keep on doing what I've been doing for the last several years, because I just love it.
Just love it. Okay.
I do.
All right. We want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, for letting Georgia and I come together to help you celebrate your 80th birthday on television with a few memories. I know that we could interview you probably for 4 or 5 or 6 hours if you could stand us, and bring up some of the exciting memories, some of the wonderful people that you've met over the years that have been very meaningful to you, like Holland Boring and Jerry Marsalis and Bob Brigemeyer, and some of the people that really that have been on our prayer list a lot, and we've been on theirs. And so you have 1 minute left.
And John Wright.
And John Wright, very important young man.
And our prayer breakfast people, we hadn't mentioned those. Our prayer breakfast meets every Saturday morning at 6 o'clock. And
at Denny's on 5th Street.
At Denny's on 5th Street, and it isn't an exclusive club. Just whoever the Lord sends comes to the prayer breakfast.
Who else had a birthday
so y'all
yesterday?
come.
Who else had a birthday on the 13th with you?
Oh, Martha Richardson.
Very important lady in our life.
That used to own the Red R. Many people know her in Grand Prairie. Martha Richardson's birthday is exactly the same day mine is, and I would say exactly the same age. But now that I've told you I'm 80, I don't want her to get upset with me if some other, if somebody finds out she
is also
may be
80.
the same age.
Mr. Jackson, you're a precious young man. You have been a real mentor for me, and I have tried to follow in your footsteps. I don't measure up to you a lot, but you sure do have a good, forgiving spirit, and I want to thank you for letting me interview you today. It's been a pleasure to be your wife as of September the 10th for about 57 years upcoming. So you just hang in there and you'll get to be 80, and also married 57 years in the same year of 2001. And that's a distinguished place to be, Mr. Jackson.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Georgia?
Yes, I just want to take this opportunity, even though yesterday was your birthday, to wish you a wonderful birthday, and God bless you with many more happy years. And I would like to say for my sister who lives in Brenham, Texas, and she's not able to be here, but I know she would send you her warmest birthday wishes too.
Yes, yes. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.
Amen.